How are you? Welcome back. This is installment number 3 of the Guitar Gym for Rookies. Happy to be here. Welcome back to the woodshed. So the first week, like I said, week number 3. First week we talked about playing chords and just getting used to all of the classic problems you come up against when doing bar chords, when trying to get your fingers to clear the other strings to make sure that everything is ringing out without any of these crazy buzzing, crazy noises happening. Then last week we talked about playing chord progressions and a little bit about where those chords come from when you hear what is a 1-4-5, a 1-5-6-4 in a key. And there were some charts, some PDF charts, so hopefully you have access to those to just print them out, hold them up. Or you can sort of pin them up wherever you practice, and they give you a real easy way to reference if you're playing any of those kind of standard 2-5-1 or 1-5-6-4. You can look up and see what those chords are in any of the keys. Today I want to talk about playing strum patterns. And a lot of times with strum patterns we get really confused, and I remember I did when I was really excited to play songs that I knew, but when I would look at strum patterns written down, it was like down, down, up, 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 down, 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 up, up. And then I would just I would get lost because I didn't quite know what was happening. And I made sure that when pick in hand, all right, we're going down, down, up, up. And I'm like, man, it just never sounds like the song that I'm trying to learn, So I want to sort of zoom out from there and let's talk about what's happening with all of those strum patterns. Sometimes you don't have to play all of those in-between attacks, down, up, down, up. I want to talk about how we get a good handle on the separation of the beat. Then I want to give you sort of a way to practice using a beat grid. This was a really helpful way for me to sort of get used to this whole idea of not only getting a handle on strum patterns, but just rhythm in general, I think is really important. Then I'll give you some specific patterns that we're going to go through. Some are a little bit easier, some are a little bit more difficult. But the most important thing with this is remember we're at the Guitar Gym for Rookies. We want to train smart. So I'll give you content of what to practice, but we're going to walk through how to practice these, and then we'll get to do that together. So all of that, let's jump in and let's look at the sheet. So my man Jason at Jamplay, if you could put up number 1 on the screen there. And on this PDF, we're starting with a very simple progression between a C and an F major 7. And why I want to start here is because I think these are both really nice chords, and they're movable. You can put them on different spots in the neck if you get sick of playing just in these positions. But I think when you start warming up, I think it's important to learn to play the simple things really well, as opposed to all the complicated things mediocre, right? So sometimes I'll sit down and I just put my metronome on 20, 30 beats per minute and play something really, really simple, because I think it's important to make sure I'm clean and thorough, calm, and then I just, sometimes I'll hit a timer of 5 minutes and just play it and make sure that I am playing it clean. So let's do that together. What I want to do is we're going to start with a C. So look at the tab right there. What we're doing is just a C, and I'm going to add this third finger down on the bottom. And if you notice, if you are one of these passionate rookies out there, and you notice that every time you have to strum a C chord, that you have to either avoid playing this low E string, or you have to just sort of mute it with the third finger, you can do that. That's totally fine. But one thing that's really nice is if you actually just put your third finger down on the low E on the 3rd fret, and then put your pinky right underneath it, it gives a little bit more oomph and punch and more Balboa to that chord. I didn't think I would say that. And so from that C, you get a little bit more bottom to it, and that sounds much more full. And then going to an F major 7, you can do the same thing. We can actually just put from a standard F major 7, your first finger on the B string, your second finger on the G on the 2nd fret, and then your third finger goes on the D, right? And then we're going to do a similar thing where you just put your third finger down on that C note on the A string 3rd fret, and then take your pinky and put it down on the third right there. And we're going to go to this chord. Now, a lot of people, when you see people play this chord, a lot of times they'll actually grab the thumb all the way up here. What happens here is, remember we talked last time when we were with week number 1 and week number 2, when you have your thumb up here, this will actually limit your ability to reach some of the other chords. So this is where you sort of break that rule, because you want to reach all of the other notes on here, but sometimes just getting a bass note with the thumb, this is where you break the rules and try to do that. But you don't have to do that. You can just avoid playing that like this, or use your third finger to mute it, whatever you decide. The important thing here is just making sure that the chord is clean and making sure that you're not rushing it, right? Because when you first get used to playing chord to chord, it's very easy to just keep going and thinking, well, I'll clean it up later. And that's fine, but you're at the gym now. We're at the guitar gym for rookies, so we're here to clean up all of those little things. So let's try that now. So if you notice that any string is buzzing, right, we have to analyze what it is. Make sure you're not overpressing. Make sure your wrist is in a good position. Like we talked about last week, you guys had some really good questions about the angle of the neck of the guitar. Experiment with that so you can, it's not just a force of the will. You want to make sure that you get all of those notes clean. And so all of those factors we talked about last time, just keep those in mind. So, I'm talking too much. Let's play. Ready? So 60 beats per minute. I have my handy dandy little 9-volt metronome here. So here we go. We're going to go just straight strums. C to F major 7. 1, 2, ready, go. Then we'll just end here. Right, some nice, standard, pleasant chords. But what I want to do is highlight a couple of things. With this progression, you'll notice that every time we strum down, that's when the click hits, right? I have one of these metronomes that you can see it sort of goes back and forth, right? I don't know if I'm lining it up. So you can sort of visually see what's happening in the beat. And every time it clicks, every time it hits, we're strumming 1 down, right? What you can do is actually tap your foot along, right, when you're strumming. And one of the cool things is that as your foot hits the ground when you're tapping, like 1, 2, 3, 4, that's actually going to get lined up with what the pick is doing as well. So if you find it a little bit difficult to keep up with a metronome, sometimes just having a couple limbs doing the same thing along with a metronome can help your whole body just feel a little bit more comfortable with the rhythm, with the tempo of what's going on. So all that to say, when you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, we want to make sure we get comfortable playing on the click, on the click. And then we want to make sure we're as comfortable playing on the click, we're as comfortable with the silence in between it. And this is where we get into the idea of separation of the beat, all right? So if we look at exercise number 2, if you want to go ahead and pull up the tab there, exercise number 2, what's happening here is that we're actually just adding a couple more strums, some eighth notes, down, up, and usually with eighth notes you're going to go down, up. As your foot, right, as you go down on the beat, as your foot comes up, so also does your pick, right? So it's kind of easy to kind of get that 1 and 2 and 3. I know that when I first was learning eighth notes and learning not just how to notice them on a page, but to actually really feel them, it's really important to think about like like the pendulum, that it's like the opposite side, 1 and 2 and 3. Or if it's going slow, like on this, it's in between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And when you get lost in that space in between, that's when just keeping your foot and just remember, okay, when my foot hits the ground, the pick goes down. When my foot lifts up, my pick goes up. That makes it a little bit easier, right? So what we're doing is sort of building the pillars of the song. You're building the pillars of the rhythm. So think about each of these clicks as sort of like the pulse, right? This is the quarter note pulse of every single strum pattern that you'll likely come across. If you play another weird timings, this changes just a little bit. But for right now, just think about these as sort of pillars. This is like holding up the rest of the rhythm, right? And then the space in between those is kind of your eighth notes. We can subdivide those even more where we get to like triplets and 16th notes, which we'll get to in a little bit. But I just want you to start seeing that image and just start practicing that way, where you're actually going, foot hits the, pick goes down, and then line up both ways, down, up, down, up. So if we look at number 2, sorry, once I say to Jason, put up the tab, then I get yapping on. But let's look at number 2, and we have C, and then we're going to go to F major 7. So it's the same chords, but now we're going to go down, up, down, up, down, down. All right. So just line up your foot, down, up, down, up. And what you'll notice is that with so many strum patterns, and this is a really good example, constantly moving, and you're actually just jumping over the strings. You're not playing at certain points. So instead of thinking of, okay, down, up, down, up, down, down, you don't want your hand to just like stop in the middle of a motion and then have to go back up or down. Start thinking about this is always going to be, for the most part, is going to be just a very natural down, up, down, up. And when you accent a certain part of the beat, that's when you strum. So like this, for the very first one. So see how I'm going to keep this going? And all I'm doing is actually just avoiding playing. Like I'm on my way back up, I have to return to, I have to return up in order to strum down again on that quarter note. But the foot also does that as well. Just start keeping that in mind, that it's not just down, up, and then wait, down, down, and then rush for it. The same way that your foot goes up and down, keep this going, right? So then we're going to go from that to F major 7. So let's try that together. So here at 60 beats per minute. 1, 2, ready, go. So now that we're starting to visualize, okay, we have when the click hits, our foot hits the ground. But also there's the space in between when your foot lifts, right? So I just want you to start visualizing that. As we go to number 3, what we're going to be doing now is we're going to actually accent another part of the beat. So we're strumming 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So you're going to have to go, right? So again, you're not just going down, up, down, up, down, up. It's actually just telling you what are the parts that you need to play the strings. But for the most part, you'll keep this going back and forth. And that will make a big difference in how you play strum patterns and the strums. One thing that's really interesting about guitar playing is that if something feels unnatural or really, really difficult, it's going to sound that way too. So if your arm is relaxed and you're strumming, your strum pattern is going to be relaxed. Your arm will be relaxed because you're sort of settled into the groove and your timing improves. So with everything, just remember, really, really relax. Relax and just try to settle into the groove and keep this going back and forth, back and forth. Okay, so with this one, we have down, up, down, up, down. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Okay, so let's think about that for a second. 1 and 2 and 3. Miss 4 and go down that way. Let's try this. We're going to do the same chords, C and F major 7. Let's try that at 60 beats per minute. 1, 2, ready, go. One more time. Good job. You're nailing it. Let me get some water here. So now what I want to do is just, we've talked about sort of what separating the beat sort of feels like, and we have this, it's a little bit of an abstract image of sort of click and space, right? Pillars and space, you know, sort of holding up a roof, right? Jason, if you want to go ahead and put up the 8th note grid there, I have this sheet right here, and what you'll notice on this sheet is that the clicks, I find this to be a really helpful way to see how the beat is divided, and it's very easy to sort of line up strum patterns from that point, because it's just right there, 1 and 2. So the colored columns are when it hits the click, and then when you get to the blank columns, then those are going to be when your foot, you know, lifts. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So you can do a couple different things with this sheet. Sometimes what I will do is I'll just, you know, you can put an X on a couple of different spots. I learned this from a really great guitar player named David Cullen, who's a really fantastic nylon string player. He sort of plays it all, but he introduced me to this, and I thought this was really helpful. You can take any 3 spots on here. So for instance, I'll just put maybe an X on the 1, and then I'll put an X on, I go to 2, and then maybe the and there, and then maybe an X on the 4, okay? So in the end, what's happening is I'm just deciding what are the parts of the beat that I'm going to accent. So I would just really think about, you know, just turn on the metronome, and I have to do 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And I'm just going to clap, or you can strum a chord. It doesn't matter, just as long as you know where to accent those beats. So 2 of these are going to be on a hit. But then, see, we have the and of 2. So that's the space between beats 2 and 3. That right there, we have to make sure we know, even though it's an empty space, we have to make sure we know exactly where that click is going to be. So, from the beginning, 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Okay? So the reason why this is important is because once you have a good understanding of what's happening in between the clicks, right? We want a good understanding of what's happening on the clicks, but in between the clicks. Now that gives us a little more freedom to add accents here and there. So when you see those crazy strum patterns, they're like down, down, up, half strum, up, down, up, down, hit, playing, and they just look absolutely insane. All of them are accenting empty spaces in between the clicks, right? So anytime you're playing along with the song that you're trying to figure out the strum pattern for, look for the quarter note pulse. See through all the rest of the ornamentation, all the rest of the decoration on the rhythm, on the strum pattern, and just look for that steady, right? And from there, you'll be able to add other things once you get comfortable with that space. So now what I'll do is I'll take that same rhythm that we just created, right? So we're on 1, we're on the end of 2, and then we're on 4. And let's just add the chords that we were adding here. Let's start with just a C. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, and 3, 4. So I should say we want to make sure that we do an up anytime we're on an and a down when we're on a click on one of the numbers. 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So you'll notice this keeps going. This keeps going. So now let's add C, and then we'll do F major 7 on the same one. Right, so that's not listed on the PDF of the tabs there, but I just want to show you how this can be a really helpful way to see how strum patterns are working. So again, you're accenting certain parts, meaning you're strumming certain parts, and then other parts you're not. You're just sort of missing the strings. The other thing that this can be helpful for is actually like writing a down arrow or an up arrow in order to make a pattern. So for instance, when we did number 2, right? I'm just going to fill out on this sheet the 1 and 2 and. What we were doing is we did a down on beat 1, we did an up on the and, we did an up on the and then we did a 3 and a 4. Okay, and I know this is a little tricky to see, but so I'm going down, down, down. Okay, so if this makes sense, now I'm actually looking at how the strum pattern looks on the beat grid. And from there, you're going to feel more comfortable, like you're getting locked into the pattern. So back at number 2, it's not just looking at down, up. You're actually seeing it on the grid, and that makes it a little easier. And what I did is I just put the direction of the strum on there, if that makes sense. Down, up, down, up. So let's try that. So that would be ready, go. Down, up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, down. All right. So you'll have access, I think there'll be a link right below in the comments there to look at these, and you can print them out and make your own versions of them. But we have triplet versions, so there's using triplets, and then as well as 16th notes, which we'll get to in a little bit. But at this point, let's, the supplemental content is only available for members, so make sure you sign up. Please make sure you sign up. Let's take some questions now. I yapped for quite a bit. We played for a little bit. Let's take some questions. Let me know if you have anything. Let's see. So, waiting for questions here. So yeah, question. Can this strumming pattern be played across different time signatures? That's a good question, because if you go into a different time signature, you'll have a slightly different way of feeling what the quarter note pulse will be. So, for example, to get a really good solid grasp on just 1 and 2, just your 4/4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. You can just pick a 4-syllable word. You know, like when I studied this with Dave Cullen years back, and he would talk about Alabama, Alabama, right? Whereas if you have 3/4, it's Delaware, Delaware. There's a little bit more of a bounce to it. So these strum patterns will change slightly when you go to a different time signature. But the entire concept of looking for the pillars on the click and knowing the space in between to accent, that remains the same no matter what you're in. Hope that answers your question. Let's talk about number 2. Okay, in pattern number 2. Yeah, so if we were to put that in 3, so like 1, 2, 3. Right, you'd have to actually take one of those beats off in order to make it fit. So just make sure whatever, if you're in 3 or if you're in 4, before you get playing, just say a 4 or 3 syllable word to help you get into the groove and the rhythm of what it is before you start strumming. I find that to be a really helpful thing. Okay, so let's keep going. And if you have any other questions, just pop them up on the screen and Jason will take care of you. So now the next one right here, we're going to look at exercise 4. And what I want to do on exercise 4 is we're going to change the chords. We're going to keep a very similar strum pattern as we're working in number 3. But now on number 4, we're going to go to a D. So we're going to start with a D. Obviously, you know that chord. That's an easier one. And as we talked previously, remember that if you get used to playing a D, guitar players, we tend to really favor this side of the hand. And from this side of the hand, it can be a little bit difficult, especially when you reach up the 3rd finger to clear that high E string. Just remember, use gravity to your advantage. When you put your guitar, don't force your elbow to stay up. Really let your elbow drop, stay in a relaxed position. And from there, it's a whole lot easier to reach the notes that you want. So then when we go to D from here, we're not worrying about reaching up that 3rd finger to mute that string right there. So I have a D, and then I'm going to go to a D major 9, and this is a really about some of these. Okay, so we've done 1, 2, and 3 of just C and F major 7. So let's get rid of that and get some of these other colorful chords in. And you don't need to know all kinds of crazy shapes in order to play colorful chords. This one I believe we did last week, but let's try this. Put your 2nd finger on the low E on the 2nd fret. And then you have the A string here, then you have a D, and then your 3rd finger and your 4th finger all the way up on the 2nd fret on the G and B, and then you have a high E, and you just ring the whole thing. That's a D major 9. That's a really nice chord. So we're going to go from a D to a D major 9. Now remember what we talked about last week when it comes to playing chord progressions. When you're going from one chord to the next, instead of thinking about jumping from here and trying to find the new spot like that, the goal is to make sure you're sort of almost getting into the shape of the chord right before you press the rest of the chord down. And that will make a big difference between getting from beat 4 on one chord and beat 1 of a new chord without any kind of stumbling and gap in between. I always think it's really important to make sure you only practice and only play as fast as you can change from beat 4 on one chord to beat 1 on another chord. The reason why, right? The reason why is because you don't want to memorize that gap. And then your muscle memory just always puts a gap in between going from chord to chord. So a way to combat that is, 1, we talked about last week, is sort of getting in the shape of the chord. And 2, just keeping this going no matter what. Because this will sort of keep the troops in line. Like, no matter what, I'm playing the next chord. So if you're there or not, you better figure out how to get in line as quick as possible. Whereas if you wait, if this one has a little bit too much grace on this hand, if you wait a little bit, then again, you're memorizing the silence between the two, and you don't want that. You don't want that gap. You want it to be very clean. So from D to this D major 9, everything is changing. All right, so your second finger is going all the way down there. And And then the next one, we're going to go to an E minor, and we're going to add this really cool, we're going to add an F sharp in here. So typically you play your E minor like this, but what's available to us from here is actually just moving this up, just like that. And what that does is give you a little bit more warmth to the chord. And if anybody that you're playing along with is playing a standard E minor, when you put this up just a little bit, it really brings an extra color to it. So I tend to like this one. And if you're really daring, you can put your second finger and put it on the 3rd fret of the B, and you get this chord. Yeah, I love that chord. And if you're really, really crazy, you can put your pinky all the way up here. Right? But for right now, for this exercise, we're just going to go from here. Now, to get from our D major 9, this is an exercise 4 here, from this D major 9 to the E minor. You can use your 1st and you can use your 3rd, but you could also use your pinky if that's a little easier. So the pinky would travel from the B string on the 2nd fret, and then go all the way up to the 4th fret on the D, like that. And then from here, we're going to a G, the last chord on here in exercise 4. We have a G major 7. And you'll notice that there are some, we'll play the 3rd fret down here, but then there's an X right next to it because we're going to mute this next string here. And this is a really nice chord. It's sort of like taking the top of a D chord, but instead of this finger here, I'm going to put my 1st finger on that high E, and then I just reach the 2nd finger all the way back, so all the way up to here. And as I'm doing that, remember we've talked a lot about clearing the strings, making sure it's not in range of the other string. Here's where the rules flip, and you actually want to make sure that this middle, that 2nd finger, is sort of muting in the range of this right here. So we have, and so as you strum all the way through it, you don't really hear that, but that keeps it nice and warm. So the chords again are going to go D to D major 9 to E minor, add 9 to a G major 7. And these are all really nice chords that are found right within here. Now that we have those, what's tricky is you want to practice getting from shape to shape and feel comfortable with that, and just do sort of one strum on each. And now we're going to have to put our strum pattern in that we talked about before. So remember, this is where the whole thing starts to get a little bit crazy. Our brains are like, okay, I finally got that whole strum pattern with just a C and F major 7. And it's very funny how the brain works this way, so expect this. If you realize, if you experience this, just know that it's like this for everybody. You might be doing the exact same thing on the right hand, but you change one thing on the left hand, and all of a sudden this hand starts to feel new and different and confusing again. So the goal of really getting a solid understanding your strums and getting a solid pick technique is really being able to kind of throw every possible curveball with your left hand, and this is just chunking away. It just keeps going, right? So we'll go through that rhythm again. So in number 4, you have down, so 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, down, up, down, up, up, down. So remember, we have to miss on beat 3. So let's try that slowly. And then we go to D major 9, E minor, add 9, G major 7. And now we want to, again, put it together without the gaps in between, all right? So let's try this at 60 beats per minute. 1, 2, ready, go. G major 7 to D major 9, G major 7. One more time. So now we have a handle on the click. We have a handle a little bit of the silence in between with our down, up, down, up. Now let's think about adding whatever variation you want to it. Remember, you want to keep the pulse going. So no matter what, with a strum pattern, that pulse is going to be in there somewhere. Even if you're actually missing the beat, missing will actually accent where that should be. Just in the same way on this, I actually didn't strum at all on beat 3. But you can feel it because I missed it, all right? It's a very interesting thing how that works. Right? You just naturally feel something should be there, and so your brain sort of fills it in. That's where the beat should be. Well, you can add in something different, like instead of, you could go, right? You can add whatever extra strums you want in there. You can go, whatever you want to do with it, as long as you have the chord, as long as those pillars are holding up the roof of the song, of the beat, or whatever. It's a weird analogy, but it works, at least for me. It makes sense. As long as those pillars are there, then you can accent in the spaces as many times as you want, right? All right, do we have any other questions before we move on? Please let me know. I want to talk a little bit about getting to our, in exercise 5. Now we're going to actually expand out just a little bit more. Let's see what questions we have here. You guys feeling good? All right. Does the F major 9 refer to F as the major, or is the 9 note the major? That's a very good question. So a lot of times you'll see major 9, minor 13, minor 7 flat 5 times 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. Some of these chords get really, really crazy sounding. But the easiest way is to remember you start with the first part of the chord, so it'll be a D, or in this case it'll be an F. And it'll say an F major, okay? So if it's F major, then we know it's a major chord. And anything that goes above, so a chord will be built with a root, a third, and a fifth. If it says major, then we know that it's root, third, fifth, and nothing is happening with those notes, meaning the third, if I drop it one pitch or raise it, it's going to be either suspended or minor, you know. But the 9 is actually referring to a color note that's an octave higher. So for example, if I were to play like a G right here, and I just play a G scale, so you have root, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and this is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. If you keep going in that same exact scale into a higher octave, that's when you get what is a 9 or an 11 or a 13. And that would sound like this. The 9 would actually be the second an octave higher. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is our root, and then 9, right? So now if I add this into a G major, so anytime you see like an add 9 or a major 9, just look at like the F, for instance, in your question here, does the F major 9, does the F, the 9 note is just coloring what's already decided to be major or minor. So I could do a minor 9 F, you could do this, right? Or a major 9. They both serve as a major or minor, but any of the numbers that come after that are usually coloring what is already present in the chord. I hope that makes sense. Let's see, when playing with others, is it recommended that everyone plays the same strum pattern? I used to think that when I remember when I first started, the first thing I would do is sort of, if I was playing in a, with other guitar players, I would sort of just match what they were doing. And that's going back to what we talked about before. Like if you're sitting around with a group of friends, someone starts playing something, everyone's going to look at it. Okay, what chords are you playing? And then, okay, down, down, up, 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 down, up, down. Remember, don't look for that. I hope that this lesson will help you see to not look for all of the intricacies of the rhythm before you look for just the solid pulse, the quarter note pulse and the click of each of those. So if someone's playing, right, and then someone starts jamming on whatever the pentatonics or whatever, instead of thinking like, oh, okay, I have to go down, up, down, and then down, up, down, up. Just think, try to feel where the beat is. And I picked a bad example only because this is actually the beat, the accent is on the other side of the beat. Right, so in that case, don't try to match what the other person is doing. Try to find the solid part, try to find the pillars first, and then you can add whatever variation you want to in the spaces between the pillars. And what's great about that is you will actually complement what they are doing. It's like harmonizing rhythm, right? If they play something that's like really, it's just kind of chunking away on all of those, and you accent certain parts of the beat that they're not, as long as you're linked up with the quarter note pulse, it's going to sound cool, and it's actually going to be a nice dialogue. So I think a really good jam is not trying to play all the same thing, unless you're all learning the same song. But if it's just a very loose sitting down and doing a jam, then I would say, look for the pulse. Don't try to match what everyone else is exactly doing. See, do we have any other questions here? No. Okay. All right. So on this sheet, what I wanted to do is just show you we have the subdivision of 16th notes. And this gets even a little bit crazier. So on my metronome here, we have another question here. Let's take that before I dive in. Can you cover the D major 9 again? Absolutely. All right, so the D major 9, you're going to put your second finger on the low string, on the E, and then you're going to actually take your third finger and go on the G on the second fret, and then take your pinky and go on the B string on the second fret. And then you just have to make sure that all of the notes are ringing. So the ones that are open are not being muted by the ones that are pressed, right? And there's a lot of different ways to play this chord. But something about this one is just a nice full. Some chords you have to avoid certain strings. This is one of those. They're all just ringing out. So yeah. So second finger, third and fourth, and just watch out when you're doing this. You could do it, with your first, second, and third. You could do that. I find it a little bit easier with second, third, and fourth. But just be aware of you have to cram all of those into a one geographic location on that fret. So as you do that, be aware of your hand tightening. Our players, especially when you're playing a new chord, it's very easy to actually sort of, you'll notice this. As soon as I point this out, you're going to notice it. It's easy for your fingers to sort of actually clamp this way. So if you go to play a chord like this, it may feel really difficult for that middle to go all the way up to the top. Well, you have to remember that the pressure, the direction of the pressure in our fingers wants to be not together, right, in the hand, but actually against the strings, right, this way. So just make sure that you keep some space, some breathing space between the fingers, so they're not like all up in each other's business, right? You just want to make sure they're relaxed and they're working together, but you give them space. Give them some space, so not too crammed like that. All right, so that's your D major 9. All right, so when it comes to this, the 16th notes, now instead of the click of 1, 2, 3, 4, and we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now we're going to subdivide. We're going to divide those up even more. So you have 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E, and that gets a little bit crazier, but that's what happens with really, really complex strum patterns, is it's accenting the E and it can even, you can even subdivide it more from there, but don't worry about that too much. Just the idea of thinking about rhythm as a grid and then lining up your strum patterns with accenting different parts of that grid, I think just that alone improved my play before I even picked up the guitar after learning that, because it really helped to bring things together. I will say, this is kind of a little bit of a side note, I have a metronome, you know, as I said before, that goes click and it clicks on either side. If you have one of those really old piano metronomes that, like, you know, it's got a little weight on top and it sort of goes back and forth, those might mess you up for a long time, and they did for me, because the way that it makes the click is when it hits the middle, right? So I'm so used to being like, okay, click, 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 click. But those ones, those old piano ones, and oh, those are so frustrating because they'll go like click, click, click. So all of that space in between, it's a lot harder to visualize that way. So all that to say, find one. You can find apps. You can find, this is, I just like this because when I'm practicing with this, I can't click over to check my email. There's nothing else. It does one job, which is kind of a good thing to help with distraction. And the 9-volt battery lasts every 2 years, but it has that visual back and forth, back and forth. And that's how you get really comfortable with a beat, when you can really feel the space in between. So if we're subdividing by 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E, and now this gets a little bit more complex. So let's go ahead and take a look at exercise 5. We have an E chord, and then we have an A major 9. And this A major 9 is going to be a nice easy one, because all you're basically doing is lifting from the second finger, right? On this one, from your E, you just lift your second finger, and you get that nice ringing chord. Now what we're doing here is we're going to actually have half strums. I do want to say, so if you pull up exercise 5 there in the tab, you'll notice that the arrows, like so for a downstroke, it's actually going up, because with the way that tab is written, right, the lower strings are on the bottom working their way up. So it feels a little bit backwards. So it's kind of looking at the guitar opposite this way. So just know that it's a little bit harder to notice it that way. But when you get it into Guitar Pro, this file, then it makes a little more sense because you can hear the up and down. But if you have been confused by that, so have I. Guitar Pro needs to have a little bit of a different way of notating that. But at first, basically you're going the the down, like towards the floor, is actually an up. So it's the opposite on there. But you're doing half strums. And so from here, so we have 1 and 2 and so 1 and 2 and so we're adding an extra subdivision between 2 and 3. Right? And then all I have to do here is take the middle and lift that off. All right, so let's try that. We're going to do this at 60 beats per minute. Ready, go. Time. 2 more times. Last time. And if that starts getting a little bit too crazy, you can always back off the metronome. Don't ever be afraid of practicing slow. I used to always think, so I have my metronome goes from 40, and then you wind it all the way up and it goes to 208. And I was always under the impression that the beginners, right, the rookies, the passionate rookies start at this part, the 40 beats per minute. and then you get more advanced and advanced and advanced, and then the real pros, man, they practice at 208 or 250. But I actually realized it's the opposite of that. I learned that from a couple of really great violin players, that they really practice at almost 40 beats per minute. So even if it feels a little bit slow, you're lining up every important movement and event that needs to happen to play the song, and you're allowing your brain to catch the pattern. So playing slow is a good thing. Don't worry about practicing slow. As we said before, in the guitar gym, one of these very strange counterintuitive things that the fastest way to really get something is to do it painfully slow, right? So just keep that in mind. It's counterintuitive, but it's true. Okay, the next one, we're gonna hit a bass note, and then we're actually gonna strum 1, 2, and a 3, right? So we have our G, 1, 2, and then we're gonna go 1, 2, and. So after we hit that, this will be a G, and then we're going back to that D major 9 that we just went through, and then we're going back to this E minor with this add 9 here for the last one. So we're gonna go 1, 2, and 4, and. So 1. Now what's tricky about this is that low note again it's on an and this is one of those cases where you have to, in order to keep the whole pattern going, you may have to do a down. Usually on an and we do an up. So this is one of those, usually there's general rules, and this is one of those where it breaks it a little bit. But two and 4, sorry, 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and remember, this is still going, and then I just have to kind of like change course, change directions for one minute little section so I can get it down on that and again. So let's try this. So go ahead and look at the tab number 6. Dun, dun, dun. 1, 2, ready. That E minor again. One more time. All right. So I want to end now with exercise number 7. And exercise number 7, this is where it gets interesting, where now you're adding in texture to the in-between parts of the beat, the spaces of the beat. And those are called ghost strums. And all that means, and I love doing stuff like this because you get a really, really cool, accented rhythmic thing, but you still have the chords going on. So like if I were to play, I have a tune of mine that has this really weird rhythm that goes. So I'm sort of establishing a chord, and then I'm sort of picking certain notes down here, but then I'm actually muting them down here. So all you hear, it's not a pitch, it's just a sound. It has a really cool sound to it, and then you can add other things. right? So just as an example of learning all of those cool little subdivisions of the beat can add up to really cool groovy things that you'll feel comfortable playing with and improvising within. Because again, if you have that quarter note pulse, you know where that, no matter what, that's going to be represented, then you can just have fun accenting other parts of the division, right? Of the space between our pillars. So with this one, what we're going to do, we're going to go. So what we're doing is just down, up, and then down, up, down, up. So you will slow down. So before our strum patterns were kind of like down, up, and keeping that going, and then just hopping over the ones that we wanted to miss, right? But this is just going to go down, up, down, up, down, up. And the best way, because what I found when I first started doing this, I would inevitably always get some weird buzzy thing happening here. You have to make sure that you're actually stopping the strings and not pressing them at all. So it helps with a C chord to go like this, and then when your pinky goes like this, I just sort of, you can put first, second, third line of defense to make sure they're all muted that way, or just use kind of your third and fourth. But just be aware of that. Make sure if you have anything that's ringing out, that means there's pressure on there that doesn't need to be there, and that may be actually pressure from your elbow, pressure from your shoulder, pressing a little bit too hard. So remember, the guitar, don't worry about the death grip, right? We're doing a speed bag here, and a speed bag is a very relaxed motion, right? When you're in the gym. So just make sure you keep that calm and relaxed. And then we go to the next chord in that, in number 7, we have that F major 7. So now let's try that at 60 beats per minute. And again, this is something, just have fun with all of those in-between sounds. Ready, go. So, yeah, just basically to recap, what we wanted to do is, remember, we want to think smart. We're not just, so as I'll probably say this each lesson, as Mickey says to Rocky, when Rocky asks him in Rocky 1 to train him, and he says, you got the heart, kid, but you ain't got the tools. So what we're doing here in this guitar gym is really focusing not just on practicing, but those really help the whole concept come alive and make sense. So seeing the beat on a grid, seeing it as the pillar and the spaces in between, and then just making sure that you keep the quarter note pulse represented, and then you can have fun accenting the space in between. So I hope that was helpful for you. Let's take some questions, and then we will send you on your way. Let's see, what brand and model is your guitar? This is my absolute dream guitar. This is made by Sheldon Schwartz in Toronto, Ontario. So go ahead and look up schwartzguitars.com. And he builds all kinds of really, really amazingly beautiful guitars. And we worked on this one for a couple of years to sort of get the wood combination, the neck, the profile, the frets. Like, I wanted it to, it's sort of like having a hand-tailored suit, right? It's hard to buy off the rack after something like that. I've never had a hand-tailored suit, so I don't know. Maybe it's different, but that's the only analogy I have for now. Because me going back to some other guitars, they're nice, but it does not have that at-home feeling the way that this one does. So yes, look up schwartzguitars.com. Check them out. All right, so week number 3, I hope you're sticking with me, and if you're just joining, that's great. I think that they have, you can log in and see all of the previous ones we've done so far and access the tabs and the guitar profiles. Next week, we're going to talk about how to play. So we started with playing chords. Week number 2 was playing chord progressions. This week we did the playing strum patterns. I want to talk about playing single notes, so developing a really, really good pick technique. We'll get into scales, major scales, pentatonic scales, arpeggios, finger picking, learning to play with expression, how bends and slides can really add something, and then learning to play with others, how to have a really good jam. So this whole guitar course is, the Guitar Gym for Rookies is focused on what are the really key areas that if you get a really good couple of insights on each of those, your playing will be well-rounded, and you can apply those to whatever complex things you do way down the road. Because learning what we talk about, learning to play chords, learning to understand the division of the beat, that's something that extends way beyond major 7. I hope you can see that. We're sort of touching the tip of the iceberg in some of these, but know that you can use these concepts for the rest of your playing, the rest of your training, whatever you want to do. All right. I just want to thank you guys for tuning in again, and I will see you all next week. Have a good week. Peace.